Imagine you're in the most important conversation of your life. The clock is ticking toward your final hours. What would you say? What truth would be so crucial that you'd spend your last moments making sure the people you love understood it? This was Jesus' reality in John chapter 15. Within hours, he would be arrested, tried, and crucified. And in this sacred moment, surrounded by his disciples in the upper room, he didn't give them another parable about a distant kingdom. He gave them an identity, a metaphor so simple a child could grasp it, yet so profound that 2,000 years later we're still discovering its depths. "I am the vine," he said. "You are the branches." 5 words that changed everything. But here's what most of us miss. Jesus wasn't just teaching theology. He was handing us the key to a life that actually works. A life where prayer isn't a struggle, where fruitfulness isn't forced, where peace isn't a distant dream but a present reality. Everything, and I mean everything, about your Christian life hinges on understanding what it means to be a branch. See, we spend our lives trying to be better Christians. We white-knuckle our way through spiritual disciplines. We beat ourselves up for not praying enough, not serving enough, not loving enough. We're exhausted from trying to produce what we think God expects. And all the while Jesus is saying, you're missing the point. You're not called to be a fruit factory. You're called to be a branch. In the next few minutes, I want to take you on a journey. Not just through a Bible verse, but into a way of living that will transform everything. Your prayers, your relationships, your purpose, your peace. Because when you truly understand why Jesus called you a branch, everything changes. Let's dive in. You are not the source. Understanding radical dependence. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a branch lying on the ground trying to produce fruit? Of course not. It's absurd. A severed branch doesn't gradually decline, it dies. Immediately. Because a branch has exactly one job, one design, one purpose: to stay connected to the vine. This is the first earth-shattering truth Jesus wants us to grasp. You are not the source. You were never meant to be. Read John 15:5 slowly. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. Apart from me, nothing. Not less, not it'll be harder, nothing. That word in Greek is oudais. Absolutely nothing, zero, zilch. Jesus wasn't exaggerating for effect. He was stating a biological, spiritual reality. A branch cut off from its source doesn't just struggle, it ceases to function entirely. But here's where we get it twisted. We know this theologically. We'd never deny that we need Jesus. But practically, we live like we're potted plants that just need Jesus to water us occasionally. We think, I've got this Monday through Saturday, but I'll connect with God on Sunday. Or, I'll handle my career, my finances, my relationships, and then bring God in when I need help. This is what I call supplemental Christianity, where Jesus is an add-on to our self-sufficient lives rather than the source of life itself. Think about Peter. Before the cross, he was confident in his own strength. Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. Remember what Jesus told him? Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he did. Because Peter was operating from his own resources, his own courage, his own love, and when the pressure came, he had nothing. But fast forward to Acts, same Peter, different source. Now he's standing before the same council that crucified Jesus, and he's bold, unmovable, powerful. What changed? He finally understood he was a branch. He stopped trying to conjure up courage from within and started drawing from the vine. This is the shift, from self-reliance to Christ-reliance, from I'm doing this for God to Christ is doing this through me, from willpower to His power. Here's what this looks like practically. You're facing a difficult conversation at work. Old you says, I need to be brave. I need to say the right thing. Branch you says, Jesus, I'm connected to you. Your wisdom, your words, your courage flows through me right now. You're struggling with anxiety about your finances. Old you says, I need to trust more. I need to worry less. Branch you says, I'm receiving your peace right now because I'm connected to the source of all peace. You're trying to love a difficult family member. Old you says, I need to try harder to be patient. Branch you says, your love flows through me. I don't manufacture it. I receive it and let it flow. Do you see the difference? One is exhausting. The other is effortless, not because it doesn't require faith, but because you're finally working with your design instead of against it. You are a branch. You were never meant to be the source. And the moment you stop trying to be, you'll discover a life you never thought possible. The vine-dresser's love. Why God prunes you. Now, let's talk about something we'd rather avoid. Pruning. Jesus says in verse 2, every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Wait, read that again. The branches that are bearing fruit, those are the ones that get pruned. This isn't about punishment, this is about purpose. See, we have this backwards. We think pruning is God's response to our failure. I messed up, so now God's cutting me back. But Jesus says the opposite. God prunes the fruitful branches. Why? Because he loves you too much to let you settle for good when he has great planned. Let me explain how vineyards actually work. A skilled vine dresser doesn't just randomly cut branches. He carefully, strategically removes even healthy growth shoots that are using energy, that look promising, that seem productive, because he knows they'll divert resources from the fruit. They're not bad, they're just not best. This is profound. God isn't just removing sin from your life, he's removing good things that are preventing the best things. Maybe it's a relationship that isn't sinful but isn't beneficial. Maybe it's an opportunity that sounds amazing but isn't your calling. Maybe it's a habit that seems productive but is actually keeping you from deeper intimacy with him. Maybe it's a ministry that's good but isn't what God is asking of you in this season. And here's what makes pruning painful. You can't see what God sees. From your perspective, he's taking away something valuable. From his perspective, he's making room for something invaluable. Think about Abraham. God asked him to leave his homeland, not because it was evil, but because it wasn't where his destiny was. That was pruning. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness, pruning. Paul had his thorn in the flesh that God refused to remove, pruning. But here's the promise. Every cut is intentional. Every reduction is purposeful. The vine dresser never makes careless cuts. So how do you recognize a pruning season? Here are some signs. Things that once worked suddenly don't. Doors that were open are now closed. Relationships naturally shift or end. You feel stripped of what you relied on. There's loss without obvious sin involved. You're being pushed deeper into dependence. If this is you right now, let me speak directly to you. This isn't rejection. This is refinement. The Father hasn't taken his eyes off you. He's got his full attention on you. Every cut his hand makes is guided by love. And here's what's on the other side. More fruit, greater fruitfulness, deeper impact, stronger character, sweeter intimacy. The pain of pruning is temporary. The fruit is eternal. Jesus himself was pruned. The night before his crucifixion he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will but yours be done." Even the true vine experienced the vine dresser's work, and what came from that pruning? The salvation of the world. Your pruning is producing something too, something you can't see yet, something that will make you look back and say, "I wouldn't trade what I gained for what I lost." Trust the vine dresser. He knows what he's doing. Abiding, the secret of supernatural living. Now we come to the word that changes everything. Abide. Jesus uses it 10 times in 7 verses. Abide in me, and I in you. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you. This isn't a suggestion. This is the mechanism. This is how the Christian life actually works. But what does abide even mean? We don't use that word anymore. The Greek word is meno, and it means to remain, to dwell, to stay put, to make your home. It's not about a visit, it's about residence. Think about the difference between staying at a hotel and living in your house. At a hotel, you're temporary. You're careful with things that aren't yours. You don't unpack fully. You're constantly aware you don't belong. But in your home, you relax, you spread out, you're fully yourself. You have access to everything because it's yours. That's abiding. Jesus isn't asking you to visit him during your quiet time. He's inviting you to live in him, to make your home in him, to let your life be intertwined with his, so completely that you can't tell where your life ends and his begins. But here's what this isn't. Abiding isn't a feeling. It's not goosebumps during worship or tears during prayer. Those can be beautiful, but they're not the measure. Abiding is a position, not an emotion. It's like a light switch and electricity. When you flip the switch, you're not generating electricity, you're connecting to a source that's always flowing. The power isn't about your feelings toward electricity, it's about your connection to the source. So how do you abide? Let me give you practical rhythms. First, abiding is continuous conversation. Paul said, pray without ceasing, not have a quiet time and then you're good for the day. It's constant communion. It's talking to Jesus about the decision you're making right now, the frustration you're feeling right now, the joy you're experiencing right now. It's turning every moment into a shared moment. Second, abiding is saturating yourself in his word. Jesus said, if you abide in me and my words abide in you. You can't separate abiding in Jesus from abiding in his words. When Scripture lives in you, not just memorized, but meditated on, chewed on, lived out, you're abiding. You're letting his thoughts become your thoughts. Third, abiding is obedience. Jesus said, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. John 15:10. Obedience isn't the way we earn abiding. It's the evidence of abiding. When you're connected to Jesus, you want what he wants. Obedience stops being a duty and becomes a delight. Fourth, abiding is awareness. Brother Lawrence called it practicing the presence of God. It's cultivating a constant awareness that you're in Christ and he's in you. Right now, as you're hearing this, he's with you. When you're at work, he's with you. When you're stressed, he's with you. Abiding is remembering what's always true. Now, here's what breaks our connection, or rather, what makes us forget we're connected. Sin, of course. Unconfessed sin is like gunk in a pipe. The water is still flowing, but we're blocking the flow. Busyness. We get so distracted that we forget we're connected. Lies. When we believe lies about God's character or our identity, we pull back from intimacy. Self-reliance. When we try to be the source instead of the branch. But here's the good news. Jesus said, I in you. It's not just you striving to stay in him. He's actively abiding in you. You're not holding on to him with white knuckles, hoping you don't slip. He's holding you. Your job is simply to remain, to not pull away, to keep the connection open. And when you do, everything flows. Fruit happens naturally. Prayer becomes powerful. Life becomes sustainable. Joy becomes constant, not because circumstances are perfect, but because you're connected to the source of joy. Abiding isn't complicated. It's simply staying connected to Jesus in every moment of every day. And when you do, the supernatural becomes natural. The fruit promise, what flows from connection. Let's talk about fruit, because this is where we get confused and frustrated. Jesus makes an extraordinary promise. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. John 15:5. Not some fruit, not a little fruit, much fruit, abundant fruit, the kind of fruit that makes people stop and ask, "What's different about you?" But here's the key. Fruit isn't produced. Fruit is born. It's the natural result of life flowing through the branch. Think about it. You've never seen an apple tree straining, grunting, trying really hard to make apples. The tree doesn't attend apple-making seminars or read books about better apple production. The tree does one thing, stays connected to its roots, soaks up nutrients, and apples just happen. It's biology. It's design. It's inevitable when the conditions are right. This is revolutionary for how we approach the Christian life. We think fruitfulness is about doing more, trying harder, getting busier. But Jesus says fruitfulness is about abiding. Stay connected, and fruit is inevitable. Pull away, and you can work yourself to death and produce nothing of eternal value. So what is this fruit? Galatians 5:22-23 gives us the profile. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Notice it's singular fruit, not fruits. It's not a menu where you pick a few. It's a complete package. And here's what's wild. Every quality on that list is impossible to manufacture. You can't make yourself more loving. You can't force joy. You can't conjure peace. These are supernatural qualities that only come from supernatural connection. This is the difference between fruit and works. Works are what we do for God. Fruit is what God does through us. Works drain us. Fruit flows from us. Works require effort. Fruit requires connection. Let me get practical. You're in a conflict with your spouse, and you feel patience rising up that isn't natural to you. That's fruit. You're facing a financial crisis, and you experience peace that doesn't make logical sense. That's fruit. You're serving in ministry, and you have love for people who are difficult. That's fruit. You're dealing with a frustrating co-worker, and kindness comes naturally. That's fruit. You didn't manufacture any of that. You simply stayed connected to the vine, and his life produced his character through you. But there's more. Jesus says this fruit brings glory to the Father and proves you're his disciple. John 15:8. In other words, the world doesn't see Jesus through your perfect theology or your impressive ministry resume. They see Jesus through your fruit. When they see supernatural love, impossible peace, unexplainable joy, when they see the character of Christ flowing through you, they know you're connected to something beyond yourself. This is kingdom impact, not programs and platforms, but transformed lives displaying Christ's character. One person abiding in Christ and bearing fruit has more impact than 1,000 people working in their own strength. And here's the multiplication principle. Fruit contains seeds. Every apple has seeds for more apple trees. When you bear fruit, you're not just blessing people in the moment, you're planting seeds for future harvest. Your love inspires others to love. Your peace gives others permission to find peace. Your joy is contagious. The fruit you bear today creates fruit tomorrow in ways you'll never see this side of eternity. So stop trying to produce fruit. Stop straining. Stop performing. Just stay connected. Abide. Let his life flow through you, and watch what happens. The fruit will come not because you're impressive, but because he is. Not because you're adequate, but because he's more than enough. Prayer transformed. When branches ask. Now we need to talk about one of the most misunderstood verses in the Bible. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. John 15:7. Whatever you wish. Really? That sounds dangerous. Like a blank check, like a genie in a bottle. But that's not what Jesus is saying. Look at the condition. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, This isn't a formula for getting what you want. This is a description of what happens when you're so connected to Jesus that his desires become your desires. When you abide, when you're living in constant communion with Christ, when his words are shaping your thoughts, when his heart is becoming your heart, your prayers change. You stop asking for what you want and start asking for what he wants. You stop praying from your agenda and start praying from his. And here's the miracle. When you're asking for what he wants, of course, it will be done. You're praying in alignment with his will. You're not trying to convince God to do what you want. You're partnering with God to see what he wants accomplished on earth. This is prayer transformed. It moves from duty to delight, from monologue to dialogue, from asking God to bless your plans to discovering his plans and joining him. Think about it practically. When you abide, your prayers start to sound different. Instead of God, change this person, you pray, God, change me, give me your heart for them. Instead of God, remove this difficulty, you pray, God, what are you teaching me in this? How do you want to display your glory through this? Instead of God, give me this opportunity, you pray, God, what are you calling me to? I want your will more than my wish. This is the kind of praying that gets answered. Not because you've found the magic formula, but because you're praying from connection rather than demand. And notice Jesus says, ask whatever you wish. He's not saying you won't have desires. He's saying when you abide, your desires get sanctified, they get aligned, they get transformed. You'll still want things, but you'll want the right things. You'll desire what God desires. This is freedom. You're not constantly wondering if you're praying the right way or using the right words. You're simply talking to the one you're connected to about what's on both of your hearts. And when you pray like this, you'll start seeing answers that blow your mind, not because you've manipulated God, but because you've aligned with God. And there's nothing God loves more than answering the prayers of a branch that's asking for what the vine wants to produce. Prayer stops being a struggle. It becomes a conversation, a partnership, a joy. Living as a branch, practical daily application. So how do you actually live this out? How do you go from understanding the branch metaphor to embodying it? Let me give you practical handles for daily life. Start your day with connection, not consumption. Before you check your phone, before you scroll through news, before you jump into your to-do list, connect to the vine. It doesn't have to be elaborate, just, Jesus, I'm yours today. I'm connected to you. Your life flows through me. I'm a branch today, not the source. Make decisions from connection. When you're facing a choice, big or small, pause and ask, what does abiding look like in this moment? If I'm a branch connected to Jesus right now, what would flow from that connection? This transforms decision-making from stress to peace. Approach relationships as a branch. You're not responsible for changing anyone. You're not the savior of your family, your friend, your co-worker. You're a branch through which Christ's love flows. This takes the pressure off and puts it where it belongs on the vine. Your job is to stay connected and let his love flow through you. Work as a branch. Whether you're in ministry or the marketplace, you're not working to prove yourself or to earn God's approval. You're working as an expression of the life flowing through you. This changes everything: your stress level, your motivation, your excellence, your peace in the process. Handle interruptions as a branch. When your day gets derailed, and it will, instead of frustration, try, okay, Jesus, you're in this interruption too. What do you want to flow through me right now? Patience? Kindness? Maybe this interruption is actually the point of my day. Deal with sin as a branch. When you mess up, don't disconnect in shame. Run to the vine, confess, receive forgiveness, and re-establish the flow. The enemy wants you to pull away when you fail. Jesus says, stay connected. My grace flows best through humble branches. End your day with gratitude for connection. Before sleep, reflect not on what you accomplished, but on moments you experienced connection. Where did I see fruit today? Where did I notice your life flowing through me? Where did I experience abiding? Here's what you'll start to notice. Life gets simpler. Not easier, but simpler. You're not managing 1,000 responsibilities on your own. You're not manufacturing fruit. You're not straining to be holy. You're simply maintaining connection and watching life flow. And when you feel disconnected because don't panic. You haven't fallen off the vine. You've just forgotten the connection. Stop. Breathe. Reconnect. It's that simple. Living as a branch isn't about perfection. It's about position. It's about remembering who you are and whose you are. It's about staying connected, especially when everything in you wants to take control and be the source. This is sustainable Christianity. This is the life Jesus promised when he said, "I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." Abundant life isn't about having more stuff or more success. It's about having more of him flowing through every part of your life. The invitation to true life. So here we are. You've heard the truth that Jesus wanted his disciples to grasp in his final hours. You are a branch, not a vine, not a fruit factory, not an independent tree, a branch. And everything, your fruitfulness, your prayer life, your peace, your impact, your joy, your purpose, everything flows from this one reality. You're connected to the vine. This is both humbling and liberating, isn't it? Humbling because it means you're completely dependent. You can't do this life on your own. You were never meant to. But liberating because it means you don't have to. The pressure's off. The striving can stop. You can rest in your design. Jesus didn't give you this metaphor to confuse you or to give you one more thing to try harder at. He gave it to you as an invitation to stop exhausting yourself, trying to be something you're not, and to start experiencing the life that comes from simply being what you are, a branch connected to the true vine. So, what does this look like for you today? Maybe you've been trying to manufacture fruit and you're exhausted. Today, you can stop straining and start abiding. Maybe you're in a pruning season and you're confused about what God is doing. Today, you can trust the vine dresser's hands. Maybe you've been praying with frustration because nothing seems to get answered. Today, you can start praying from connection rather than demand. Maybe you've been living like you're the source and you're running on empty. Today, you can remember you're the branch and let his life flow through you. Here's my challenge to you. For the next week, start every day with this simple declaration. Jesus, I'm a branch today. You're the vine. Your life flows through me. I'm not the source. I'm staying connected. Say it out loud. Let it reorient your perspective. And then watch what happens. Watch how your stress levels change. Watch how fruit starts appearing that you didn't manufacture. Watch how your prayers shift. Watch how your relationships transform. Watch how work becomes worship. You are a branch. That's not a limitation, it's your liberation. That's not a reduction, it's your identity. That's not weakness, it's where his strength flows best. Stay connected. Abide. And watch the vine do what only he can do, produce life through you that impacts eternity. This is what Jesus wanted you to understand. This is the life he died to give you. This is the truth that changes everything. You're not the vine, you're the branch, and that's exactly what you were meant to be.
Most people pray as if God needs to be convinced, persuaded, or informed about their problems. They beg, plead, and repeat their requests, hoping that somehow their words will finally reach divine ears. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something that changes everything about prayer. Jesus revealed a mystical secret that most believers completely miss when he said that before they ask, the answer already exists. This is not about positive thinking or manifesting techniques. This is about understanding the true nature of divine consciousness and how prayer actually works in the spiritual dimension. When you grasp this principle, your entire relationship with God transforms from begging to recognition, from asking to realizing what already is. The secret lies in understanding that God's nature is completeness, wholeness, and infinite supply existing right now in this present moment. Nothing you ask for needs to be created or sent to you because it already exists in consciousness. Your role is not to convince God to give you something, but to recognize what is already present in divine reality. Joel Goldsmith taught that the kingdom of heaven is not a future destination, but a present reality of consciousness. When Jesus said the kingdom is within you, he meant that all divine qualities, healing, abundance, and peace already exist in your true spiritual identity right now. The problem is not that these things are absent, but that you have not recognized their presence. Traditional prayer operates from a sense of separation and lack. You pray as if you are separate from God, asking an external deity to send you something you do not have. But mystical Christianity reveals that you and the Father are one. The divine consciousness that created everything is the consciousness that you are. There is no separation except in human belief. When you pray from this understanding, you are not asking God to do something. You are recognizing what God has already established in spiritual reality. Before you even recognized your need, the divine answer existed in consciousness. Your prayer becomes a moment of spiritual awareness rather than a petition for intervention. Think about how the sun shines before anyone asks for light. It radiates constantly whether you request it or not, because shining is its nature. God's nature is infinite good, perpetual giving, and constant presence. Divine love does not wait for your prayer to begin flowing. It has been flowing eternally, and your prayer simply opens your awareness to receive what has always been available. Joel Goldsmith called this recognition prayer versus petition prayer. Petition prayer says, "Please give me what I lack." Recognition prayer says, "I recognize what you have already given." One operates from emptiness and separation. The other operates from fullness and unity. The difference in results is absolutely transformative. This is why some prayers seem unanswered while others bring immediate transformation. When you pray from lack, you reinforce the belief in separation and absence. When you pray from recognition, you align with the truth of spiritual reality, where wholeness already exists. You stop trying to change God's mind and start changing your own perception. The practical application begins with a shift in how you approach every prayer moment. Instead of telling God about your problem and asking for a solution, you pause and recognize that infinite intelligence already knows and has already provided. Before your words form, the divine answer exists in consciousness waiting for your recognition and acceptance. Linda struggled with chronic anxiety for years, praying desperately for peace every single day. She would beg God to take away her fears and give her calm. Nothing changed until she learned this principle from Joel Goldsmith's teachings. She stopped asking God to create peace for her and began recognizing that divine peace already existed as her true spiritual nature. Within 3 weeks of practicing recognition prayer, Linda experienced a shift she had never known in 15 years of petition prayer. The anxiety did not disappear instantly, but she began accessing moments of profound peace that felt like remembering something she had always known. She was not creating peace through her prayer, but uncovering the peace that had always been present beneath her fearful thoughts. Joel Goldsmith discovered this principle not through theological study alone, but through direct spiritual experience. He found that when he stopped trying to demonstrate things through prayer, and instead rested in the understanding that God's completeness already included everything, miracles became natural occurrences rather than desperate attempts to manipulate divine will into action. This teaching goes back to the earliest Christian mystics who understood that Christ consciousness is not something you achieve, but something you recognize as your eternal spiritual identity. The Apostle Paul wrote that you are complete in him. Not will be complete someday. Already complete right now. Your spiritual perfection is not something you earn or create through good behavior or correct prayers. The reason this seems difficult to accept is that physical senses report lack, limitation, sickness, and problems. Your eyes see dysfunction. Your body feels pain. Your bank account shows insufficiency. But Joel Goldsmith taught that spiritual reality exists prior to and independent of physical appearances. What is true in consciousness is more real than what appears in form. Christopher was a businessman facing potential bankruptcy after his partner embezzled funds. He prayed constantly for God to send money, open doors, and rescue his failing company. Every prayer reinforced his sense of desperation and lack. His spiritual mentor introduced him to Joel Goldsmith's teaching about praying from the understanding that divine intelligence already knows and has already answered. Christopher began a new prayer practice. Instead of begging for rescue, he spent time in silence recognizing that infinite intelligence governed his life and that right action already existed in consciousness. He stopped trying to tell God what to do and started resting in trust that divine wisdom was already working through every situation even when he could not see how. Over 2 months, unexpected solutions began emerging. A former client reached out with a major contract. An attorney discovered legal remedies Christopher had not known existed. A new business partner appeared with both skills and capital. Christopher realized he had not created these solutions through his prayers but had opened his awareness to recognize what divine intelligence had already arranged before he even knew he needed them. Amanda dealt with a deteriorating relationship with her adult daughter for over 5 years. They barely spoke, and every conversation ended in conflict. Amanda prayed repeatedly for God to change her daughter's heart and heal their relationship. She felt her prayers went unheard because nothing improved despite her faithful petitions every single day. When Amanda learned about recognition prayer, she realized she had been praying as if God needed to create something new rather than recognizing what already existed. She began a practice of acknowledging that divine love already connected her and her daughter in spiritual reality even when human appearances showed separation and conflict. Amanda stopped praying for God to do something and started recognizing that divine love was already present in both of them. Within 6 weeks, her daughter called unexpectedly to talk. The conversation flowed naturally without the usual tension. Over the next 4 months, they rebuilt connection gradually. Amanda understood that the love had always been there. Her recognition prayer had simply opened her awareness to what existed beneath the surface conflict all along. The key distinction Joel Goldsmith emphasized is that you are not using prayer to get God to do something, but using prayer to recognize what God has already done. Divine consciousness has already established wholeness, harmony, abundance, and peace as the truth of spiritual reality. Your prayer does not create these conditions, but reveals them to your awareness. This is why Jesus could say that before they ask, the answer already exists, not because God predicts what you will need, but because God's nature is complete and infinite. Everything that divine love would give is already given in the eternal now of spiritual consciousness. Your prayer is the moment you stop looking for something external and start recognizing something internal and eternal. When you truly understand this principle, prayer becomes restful instead of desperate. You are not trying to convince or persuade. You are not hoping God will finally hear you. You are simply opening your awareness to recognize the divine reality that has always been present, but which you had not previously perceived through the cloud of fear and lack-based thinking. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment, what healing journey resonated most with you? The practice of recognition prayer requires developing spiritual perception beyond physical senses. Joel Goldsmith taught a technique he called listening prayer, or the practice of receptivity. Instead of speaking your needs to God, you become silent and listen for the still small voice of truth that speaks in consciousness when the human mind becomes quiet and receptive. This listening is not waiting to hear audible words, but opening your awareness to receive spiritual impressions, intuitive guidance, and the felt sense of divine presence. In this silence, you begin to perceive that consciousness is not empty, but full of divine intelligence already knowing and already acting, even before your human awareness recognizes it. Start with just 5 minutes of silent receptivity after stating your recognition that infinite intelligence already knows and has already answered. Do not try to make something happen. Simply rest in trust that divine wisdom is already present in your consciousness. Over time, this practice develops your ability to perceive spiritual reality beyond physical appearances and limitations. Another complementary practice is what Joel Goldsmith called impersonalization. When you face a problem or challenge, the human tendency is to personalize it as your problem that you must solve. But impersonalization means recognizing that what appears as your problem is actually a universal false belief in separation from God that has no power in spiritual reality. For example, if you face financial lack, impersonalization means recognizing that lack is not a personal condition, but a false belief in separation from infinite supply. If you experience illness, impersonalization means seeing that disease is not your personal burden, but a false belief in separation from divine wholeness. This shifts your prayer from asking God to fix your problem to recognizing that the problem has no reality in spiritual consciousness. Robert practiced this when diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Instead of claiming the disease as his personal burden, he practiced impersonalizing it as a false belief in separation from divine wholeness. He recognized that in spiritual reality, his true identity was complete and perfect, because God's creation is complete and perfect. Over 8 months of treatment and prayer practice, his condition improved beyond medical expectations. Joel Goldsmith also taught the importance of understanding prayer as consciousness rather than words. Many people think prayer is about saying the right words, using correct formulas, or repeating specific phrases enough times. But spiritual prayer is the activity of consciousness recognizing truth, regardless of the words used or not used at all. You can pray effectively without speaking a single word by simply resting in the awareness of God's presence and completeness. You can pray while washing dishes, walking in nature, or sitting in traffic by maintaining the consciousness that divine intelligence governs every moment and has already established harmony in spiritual reality, even when circumstances appear chaotic. This understanding frees you from the burden of trying to pray enough or correctly enough. Your consciousness of truth is the prayer, not your eloquent words or lengthy petitions. When you maintain awareness that before they ask the answer already exists, you are praying constantly even in moments when you speak no words at all. The practice of gratitude complements recognition prayer powerfully because gratitude acknowledges what already is, rather than focusing on what is not. When you give thanks before you see the answer in physical form, you are practicing the same principle Jesus demonstrated when he thanked God before the manifestation appeared. Joel Goldsmith taught that gratitude is not about being thankful that God will do something in the future, but being grateful for what God has already established in spiritual reality now. You thank God not for what you hope to receive, but for what already exists in consciousness, waiting for your recognition and acceptance into experience. Nicole struggled with chronic pain for 3 years. She began practicing gratitude not for healing she hoped would come, but for the wholeness that already existed in her spiritual identity. She thanked divine consciousness for the completeness that was true about her even when physical sensation reported otherwise. Over 5 months, her pain levels decreased significantly. She understood that her gratitude had not created wholeness, but had opened her awareness to recognize it. The most common challenge people face with recognition prayer is that physical circumstances seem to contradict spiritual truth. Your bank account shows debt while you try to recognize infinite supply. Your body feels pain while you try to recognize divine wholeness. The gap between spiritual reality and physical appearance can feel impossible to bridge. Joel Goldsmith addressed this directly. He taught that spiritual reality and physical appearance operate in different dimensions. What is true in consciousness is causative. What appears in form is effect. When you try to change the effect directly through petition prayer, you are working at the wrong level. When you recognize the truth in consciousness, the effect gradually aligns with the cause. This does not mean denying what you experience physically. It means understanding that physical conditions are not the final truth about you. Your spiritual identity as God's expression is the deeper truth, and as you maintain consciousness of this truth, the physical experience gradually transforms to reflect it. This process usually unfolds over time rather than instantly. Another challenge is the ingrained habit of petition prayer. After years or decades of asking God for things, the switch to recognition prayer feels unnatural and even wrong. You may feel like you are not really praying if you are not asking for something specific or listing your needs before God. Daniel experienced this exact struggle. He had prayed petition prayers his entire life and felt guilty when he tried recognition prayer because it seemed like he was not being humble or acknowledging his neediness before God. His breakthrough came when he realized that recognition prayer is actually more honoring to God because it acknowledges divine completeness rather than suggesting God has somehow failed to provide. Recognition prayer says God has already given everything and you are simply opening your awareness to receive it. Petition prayer inadvertently suggests God is withholding and needs to be convinced to give. When Daniel saw it this way, he understood that recognition prayer was actually deeper trust and greater faith than petition prayer ever was. His guilt dissolved and his practice deepened significantly. Some people struggle because they do not experience immediate results. They try recognition prayer for a week or two, see no change in circumstances, and conclude the teaching does not work. They return to petition prayer or give up on prayer altogether. This happens because they misunderstand the nature of spiritual practice and transformation. Joel Goldsmith emphasized that recognition prayer is not a technique to manipulate outcomes, but a practice of spiritual awareness that gradually transforms consciousness. As consciousness changes, experience changes. But consciousness does not usually shift overnight after years of contrary thinking. The practice requires patience, persistence, and trust that spiritual truth is working even when physical appearances have not yet caught up. Elizabeth practiced recognition prayer for her troubled marriage for 3 months before she noticed any change. She was tempted to quit many times, but she persisted in recognizing that divine love already connected her and her husband in spiritual reality. Small shifts began appearing in month 4. By month 8, their relationship had transformed in ways she could not have predicted or manufactured through willpower alone. The final common challenge is feeling like you are lying to yourself when circumstances are objectively difficult. If you are recognizing abundance while facing eviction, or recognizing wholeness while dealing with serious illness, your rational mind protests that you are denying reality and engaging in dangerous delusion. Joel Goldsmith's response was that you are not denying your human experience, but recognizing a deeper spiritual reality that exists simultaneously. You acknowledge what your senses report, while also knowing that spiritual truth is more fundamental and more real. You are not pretending the problem does not exist. You are recognizing that the problem exists in the dimension of effect, while spiritual wholeness exists in the dimension of cause. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. You can seek medical treatment while recognizing divine wholeness. You can take practical action about finances while recognizing infinite supply. You are not choosing between human responsibility and spiritual truth. You are bringing spiritual awareness into human experience, trusting that consciousness of truth will work through whatever practical channels are appropriate. The spiritual and practical work together, not against each other. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? As you develop proficiency with recognition prayer, you begin to live from a completely different foundation. Instead of moving through life waiting for problems to arise so you can ask God to fix them, you maintain constant awareness that divine intelligence already governs every moment and situation. This becomes your default consciousness, rather than something you remember only during crisis. Joel Goldsmith called this practicing the presence of God. It means maintaining awareness throughout your day that infinite wisdom is present right now, that divine love is operating right now, that spiritual completeness exists right now, regardless of appearances. This is not constant verbal prayer, but constant consciousness of truth underlying every activity. Joshua integrated this into his demanding career as an emergency room physician. He began each shift with a moment of recognizing that divine intelligence already knew every patient who would arrive and had already established the right action for each situation. During intense moments, he would silently recognize this truth again. He found that solutions and calm came more easily when he operated from this consciousness. Advanced practice includes recognizing this truth for others, not just yourself. When someone shares a problem with you, instead of immediately joining them and seeing the problem as real and overwhelming, you silently recognize that divine consciousness already knows and has already answered for this person, even if they do not yet perceive it. This is not about telling them their problem is not real or dismissing their suffering. You offer appropriate compassion and practical help, but internally you maintain consciousness of their spiritual wholeness and perfection. This consciousness can have tangible effects because consciousness is not limited by physical proximity or individual minds. We all participate in one infinite consciousness. Stephanie practiced this with her elderly father who was declining rapidly with dementia. While providing loving care and practical support, she maintained inner recognition that his true spiritual identity remained perfect and complete in divine consciousness. She could not know how this would manifest physically, but she trusted the truth regardless of appearances. Her father experienced periods of unexpected clarity that doctors could not explain. Stephanie understood she had not created this, but had recognized what was always true. The integration also includes recognizing this principle in challenging relationships and difficult people. When someone treats you poorly or creates conflict, the human reaction is to pray for God to change them or remove them from your life. But advanced recognition prayer sees that the divine nature already exists in them just as much as in you, hidden beneath false beliefs and fear. You recognize that the person's true spiritual identity is love, wisdom, and wholeness, even when their behavior contradicts this completely. You do not have to tolerate abuse or stay in harmful situations. You can establish appropriate boundaries, but your consciousness remains anchored in spiritual truth about them, rather than locked into reaction to their behavior. Kevin used this approach with an extremely difficult colleague who seemed determined to undermine him professionally. Instead of fighting back or asking God to get rid of this person, Kevin practiced recognizing that divine wisdom already governed both of them and that harmony already existed in spiritual reality. Over several months, the colleague's behavior shifted noticeably. Eventually, the colleague apologized and explained he had been dealing with personal crisis. The relationship transformed completely. The ultimate integration is living from the understanding that nothing needs to be demonstrated because everything already is. This sounds paradoxical because you still have experiences, make choices, and see changes in your life. But the consciousness shift is profound. You stop living in constant effort to make things happen and start living in trust that divine intelligence is already operating. Joel Goldsmith taught that this is true spiritual rest. Not physical inactivity, but inner rest, from the burden of believing you must create, manipulate, or force outcomes through your personal will. You take appropriate action in the world, but the action flows from inner guidance rather than anxious striving. You trust the process because you know that before you ask, the answer already exists. This does not mean passivity or fatalism. It means aligned action from spiritual consciousness rather than desperate action from fear and lack. Ashley experienced this in her creative work. She stopped striving desperately for success and started creating from recognition that divine creativity already flowed through her. Her work improved dramatically. Opportunities appeared naturally. She produced more with less effort because she was working with spiritual truth rather than against it. When you truly understand that before they ask, the answer already exists, your entire relationship with prayer, God, and life itself transforms fundamentally. You are no longer a beggar approaching a reluctant deity hoping for scraps. You are consciousness itself recognizing its own divine nature and completeness. This is the mystical Christianity that Jesus taught, but which institutional religion often obscured. The transformation goes deeper than improved circumstances. Though circumstances often do improve, the real transformation is internal. You develop unshakable peace that comes from knowing that divine intelligence governs your life regardless of appearances. You access joy that does not depend on external conditions. You experience freedom from the constant anxiety of trying to make life work through human effort alone. Joel Goldsmith lived this consciousness and taught thousands of students worldwide to do the same. His message was simple but revolutionary. Stop asking God to do something and start recognizing what God has already done. Stop praying from lack and start praying from fullness. Stop trying to demonstrate things and start resting in what already is. This is the secret of answered prayer. The practical result is that you begin to experience what many call miracles, but which are actually natural outcomes of living in alignment with spiritual truth. Solutions appear that you could not have engineered. Healing happens through unexpected channels. Resources arrive just when needed. Relationships transform. Opportunities emerge from nowhere. Divine timing orchestrates circumstances with precision that human planning could never achieve. But you understand, these are not miracles in the sense of God breaking natural laws for your benefit. They are the natural manifestation of spiritual law operating when your consciousness aligns with truth. Cause and effect are always operating. When the cause is consciousness of divine completeness, the effect is experience that reflects completeness. Before you even ask, the divine answer already exists in consciousness waiting to manifest in form. This understanding removes the mystery and uncertainty from spiritual life. You are not hoping God will maybe answer your prayers if you are good enough or faithful enough. You are recognizing that spiritual reality is already complete and your consciousness is opening to receive what has always been available. The outcome is certain because it is based on spiritual law rather than divine whim. The teaching also addresses one of the deepest human fears, which is the fear that you are alone, abandoned, or unsupported by the universe. When you understand that before you ask the answer already exists, you know with absolute certainty that you are never alone. Divine intelligence is always present, always aware, always providing exactly what consciousness requires for its unfoldment. This does not mean you get everything your human ego wants. It means you receive what divine wisdom knows is right for your spiritual development and life purpose. Sometimes this includes challenges that strengthen you. Sometimes it includes delays that prepare you. Sometimes it includes unexpected directions that serve purposes you cannot yet see. But you trust the process because you know infinite intelligence is operating. Joel Goldsmith students reported again and again that this trust was the greatest gift of the teaching, not the demonstrations or improved circumstances, though these were wonderful, but the deep inner knowing that they were held, guided, and provided for by infinite love that knew them completely and had answered before they even recognized they had questions. This knowing changed everything about how they moved through life. So what happens when you truly understand that before they ask, divine consciousness has already answered? You stop living as a beggar and start living as consciousness itself expressing divine nature. You stop praying from desperation and start praying from recognition. You stop trying to change God's mind and start changing your own awareness to perceive what God has already established. The journey begins today with a simple shift in how you approach prayer. The next time you face a challenge or need, pause before asking God for something. Instead, take a moment to recognize that infinite intelligence already knows, already cares, and has already established the perfect answer in spiritual consciousness. Your role is not to convince or inform God, but to open your awareness to receive what already exists. This is Joel Goldsmith's gift to the world. The mystical Christianity that Jesus taught but which got buried under centuries of religious doctrine, focused on human unworthiness and divine distance. You are not separate from God. You are the expression of divine consciousness. And in that consciousness, everything you could ever need already exists, waiting for your recognition. Before you ask, it is already given. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path. Jesus said, "The truth shall set you free." But what truth was he really talking about? For 2,000 years, churches have taught you that truth means believing the right doctrines, following the right rules, accepting the right theology. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something that changed everything. The truth Jesus spoke of is not a belief system. It is a revelation about your true identity. Most people pray for God to change their circumstances, to heal their bodies, to fix their problems. They beg, they plead, they bargain with the divine. But this approach keeps you in spiritual bondage because it is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. You are treating God as separate from yourself, as an external power that might or might not respond to your requests. Joel Goldsmith realized that Jesus was revealing something far more radical than a better prayer technique. When Jesus said, "The truth shall set you free," he was pointing to the truth of your consciousness. The truth is this: you are not a human being seeking God. You are the presence of God expressing as your individual existence. This is not metaphor or philosophy. This single realization transforms everything. When you truly understand that your consciousness is divine consciousness individualized, you stop begging for healing and start recognizing the perfection that already exists. You stop asking God to become present and start acknowledging the presence that has never been absent. This is what sets you free. The bondage Jesus spoke of is not your circumstances. It is your belief in separation from the divine source. Every problem you experience stems from this one fundamental error, thinking you are separate from God, that you must somehow bridge a gap, earn favor, or convince a distant deity to intervene in your life. This belief creates your suffering. Joel Goldsmith called this the world of appearances. You see lack, disease, conflict, and limitation all around you. These appearances seem so real that you react to them, fight them, try to manipulate or change them. But fighting appearances only strengthens them in your experience. You cannot fix an illusion by treating it as real. You must see through it. The truth that sets you free is recognizing that these appearances have no power, no reality, no substance apart from the belief you give them. Your divine consciousness is the only presence and the only power. When you realize this deeply, not just intellectually, but as a living experience, the appearances begin to dissolve. This is not positive thinking or mental denial. This is spiritual realization. It is seeing what is eternally true rather than what appears to be temporarily real. Joel taught that spiritual healing happens not by changing conditions, but by changing consciousness. When your consciousness shifts from belief in separation to recognition of oneness, your entire experience transforms naturally. Here is where most spiritual seekers get trapped. They understand the principle intellectually. They can explain that God is all, that consciousness is one, that separation is illusion. They read the books, attend the lectures, memorize the metaphysical truths. But their lives do not change. Their problems persist. Their freedom remains theoretical rather than actual. Joel Goldsmith discovered why. Knowing truth as information is completely different from realizing truth as experience. You can know that ocean water is salty by reading about it, but until you taste it, the knowledge remains abstract. Spiritual truth works the same way. You must taste the reality of your divine consciousness through direct inner experience, not mental comprehension. This is what Joel called attaining the consciousness of truth. It requires daily practice of moving beyond thoughts about God to the actual felt presence of divine consciousness. It means learning to be still enough that the mental chatter stops and the deeper awareness emerges. This awareness is not something you create or generate. You simply stop blocking it. When you practice this recognition consistently, something remarkable happens. The truth stops being something you think about and becomes something you live from. Your consciousness shifts from human reasoning to divine knowing. From this consciousness, the truth literally sets you free because you are no longer imprisoned by false beliefs about yourself and your source. Let me be clear about what this freedom actually looks like. It is not that you suddenly have no challenges, no lessons, no growth experiences. The freedom Jesus and Joel Goldsmith spoke of is freedom from the fear, anxiety, and struggle that come from believing you are alone, vulnerable and separate from infinite good. It is freedom from the mental prison of limitation. When you realize your true identity as divine consciousness expressed individually, you stop living in reaction mode. You stop feeling victimized by circumstances, manipulated by others, or threatened by conditions. Not because you develop a thick skin or learn to cope better, but because you recognize that nothing external has power over the infinite consciousness that you are. This recognition takes practice. Joel emphasized that spiritual realization is not a one-time event, but a deepening awareness that unfolds through dedicated inner work. Some days the truth feels clear and present. Other days the old beliefs seem to reassert themselves. This is normal. The key is consistent return to the practice of recognition, the habit of remembering your true identity. As this awareness deepens over weeks and months, you begin to notice tangible changes. Situations that once triggered anxiety now leave you peaceful. Problems that seemed insurmountable now resolve naturally. Relationships that were conflicted now harmonize. Not because you manipulated outcomes, but because your consciousness changed, and your experience reflects your consciousness. Joel Goldsmith shared the story of a woman who had suffered from chronic pain for over 15 years. She had tried every medical treatment, every alternative therapy, every healing modality available. Nothing worked. The pain was her constant companion, limiting her life, stealing her joy, defining her existence day after day. She came to Joel not because she believed he could heal her, but because she had exhausted every other option. She was desperate, but also deeply skeptical. Joel did not pray for her healing. He did not lay hands on her or perform any ritual. Instead, he sat with her and began teaching her about the truth of her identity as spiritual consciousness. At first, she resisted. She wanted healing, not philosophy. She wanted relief, not lessons about divine consciousness. But Joel persisted gently, helping her understand that her pain was not the problem. Her belief in separation from wholeness was the problem. The pain was just the symptom of that fundamental misunderstanding about who and what she really was. Over several weeks, something shifted in her consciousness. It was not a dramatic moment, but a gradual awakening to the truth that her body was not her identity, that pain was not her reality, that the infinite consciousness of God was expressing as her true being. As this realization deepened, the pain began to diminish, then disappear completely within 2 months. What happened to that woman was not a miracle in the traditional sense. It was the natural result of consciousness recognizing its true nature. Joel explained that when you stop identifying as a limited human body subject to conditions and start identifying as divine consciousness expressing, the conditions have no choice but to align with that higher identification. This is spiritual law. But here is what makes this different from positive thinking or mental techniques. The woman did not affirm away her pain. She did not visualize herself as healed. She did not try to convince herself the pain was not real. Instead, she learned to rest in the awareness of her true identity until that awareness became more real to her than the physical sensation. This process took time. Some days she felt the truth clearly. Other days the pain seemed to dominate her awareness, and she questioned whether any of this was working. Joel encouraged her to persist not in fighting the pain but in returning to the practice of recognition. Recognition of what? That God is the only presence, the only power, and the only reality of her being. The healing unfolded as her consciousness shifted. It was not instantaneous, and it required her daily commitment to the practice of moving beyond appearances to truth. But when the healing came, it was permanent. Why? Because it was not a physical healing. It was a consciousness healing. She had realized the truth of her being, and that truth set her free from the bondage of physical limitation. Another case Joel documented involved a businessman facing financial collapse. His company was failing. Creditors were demanding payment. Bankruptcy seemed inevitable. He came to Joel in panic, asking for prayer to save his business, to bring in sudden clients, to somehow manifest money miraculously. His desperation was consuming him, stealing his sleep, destroying his peace. Joel did not pray for business success. Instead, he taught this man the same principle. God is not a cosmic vending machine responding to desperate prayers for material supply. God is the infinite consciousness of abundance that is already expressing as your true being. The problem was not lack of money, but lack of recognition of the ever-present divine supply. The businessman struggled with this teaching. He needed practical solutions, not spiritual philosophy. He had bills due, employees depending on him, a family to support. But Joel persisted. Your consciousness of lack is creating your experience of lack. When you shift to consciousness of divine abundance as your true reality, your outer experience must reflect that inner shift. This is not magic, but spiritual law. Over the following months, the businessman practiced what Joel taught. He learned to stop the anxious mental calculations, the fearful projections, the desperate scheming. Instead, he practiced resting in the awareness that infinite intelligence and infinite supply were expressing as his consciousness. Gradually, opportunities began appearing. New clients emerged. Creative solutions manifested. Within 8 months, his business had completely turned around. What both of these cases reveal is that the truth Jesus spoke of operates at the level of consciousness, not circumstance. You cannot think your way to freedom. You cannot mentally manipulate your reality. But when you realize the truth of your divine identity deeply enough that it becomes your living consciousness, everything in your experience naturally aligns with that realization. This is how truth sets you free. The businessman later told Joel that the greatest gift was not the business recovery. It was the freedom from fear. Even during the darkest financial moments, as he practiced recognition of his true identity as divine consciousness, he found a peace he had never known. The anxiety that had ruled his life for years simply dissolved in the presence of this deeper awareness. This is what Joel Goldsmith spent his life teaching. Freedom is not about getting what you want. Freedom is about realizing who you are. When you know yourself as the presence of God individualized, you stop begging for supply, health, or happiness. You recognize these as the natural expression of your true being. This recognition does not happen overnight, but it does happen through consistent practice. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others discover these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. Which aspect of divine consciousness most challenges your current understanding? Now let me share with you the specific practice Joel Goldsmith used to move from knowing truth intellectually to realizing it experientially. He called it the practice of recognition. This is not meditation in the traditional sense of emptying your mind or achieving a special state. Recognition is the active practice of acknowledging what is already true about your divine identity until that truth becomes your living consciousness. Here is how Joel taught it. Find a quiet place where you will not be disturbed. Sit comfortably but alertly. Close your eyes and begin by releasing the day's concerns, the mental chatter, the endless planning and problem solving. Let your mind settle like a snow globe that stops being shaken. This settling creates space for deeper awareness to emerge naturally. Now comes the recognition practice itself. Silently acknowledge these truths. God is the only presence where I am. God is the only power operating in my experience. God is the only reality of my being. Do not say these as affirmations trying to make something true. Recognize them as what is already true, has always been true, and cannot be otherwise. Feel the difference between affirming and recognizing. As you practice this recognition, thoughts will intrude. The mind will wander to problems, plans, memories, distractions. This is natural. Do not fight the thoughts. Simply notice them and gently return to the recognition. God is the only presence, the only power, the only reality. Each time you return, you are strengthening your consciousness of truth. This is the practice that changes everything over time. Joel emphasized that this practice should be done at least twice daily, ideally in the morning before the day begins and in the evening before sleep. Morning practice sets your consciousness for the day. Evening practice releases the day's accumulation of false beliefs and returns you to truth. Consistency matters far more than duration. 10 minutes of genuine recognition is more powerful than an hour of mental wandering. But here is where most people stumble. They practice recognition for a few days or weeks and expect dramatic results. When circumstances do not immediately change, they conclude the practice does not work and abandon it. Joel warned against this impatience. You are reversing years or decades of consciousness, conditioned in separation, limitation, and fear. The reconditioning to truth takes time and persistence. Think of it like learning a musical instrument. The first days of practice produce awkward sounds, not beautiful music. But if you persist, gradually your fingers learn the patterns, your ear develops, and music emerges naturally. Consciousness works the same way. At first, recognition feels forced, intellectual, artificial. But with consistent practice, it becomes your natural way of being. Truth becomes your default consciousness. Joel also taught a complementary practice he called the listening consciousness. After your active recognition, sit in silence and simply listen inwardly, not for words or messages, but for the felt presence of divine consciousness. Most people spend their lives in mental noise, never experiencing the deeper awareness that exists beneath thoughts. This listening practice opens you to direct experience of your true identity beyond concepts. Another powerful technique Joel shared is what he called taking no thought. Jesus said, "Take no thought for your life, what you shall eat or drink, what you shall wear." Most people interpret this as reckless irresponsibility, but Joel revealed its deeper meaning. Taking no thought means not engaging in the anxious human reasoning that assumes you are a limited material being struggling for survival in a hostile universe. Taking no thought is recognizing that infinite intelligence is already governing your life perfectly. You do not need to figure everything out, control every outcome, or plan every contingency. This does not mean you become passive or irresponsible. It means your actions flow from divine guidance rather than fearful human calculation. There is a profound difference between these two ways of living. Practice this technique when you notice yourself caught in worried thinking, mentally rehearsing problems, or trying to manipulate solutions. Stop. Recognize that you are engaging human reasoning based on the belief in separation. Then consciously take no thought by releasing the problem to infinite intelligence, not as prayer asking God to fix it, but as recognition that divine wisdom is already handling it perfectly. This feels risky at first because you are so accustomed to controlling through mental effort. But as you practice taking no thought, you discover something remarkable. Solutions appear that you never could have reasoned your way to. Opportunities open that your planning never anticipated. Life flows more smoothly when you stop trying to be the infinite intelligence and start letting infinite intelligence express through you naturally. Joel also taught the practice of witnessing. Throughout your day, as you encounter people, situations, circumstances, practice witnessing them from your consciousness of truth rather than reacting from appearances. When you see someone sick, do not reinforce the appearance by treating them as a sick person. Silently recognize, God is the only reality of this person's being. Their true identity is divine consciousness, whole and perfect. When you face a challenging situation, do not engage it as a problem to be solved through human effort alone. Witness it from truth. God is the only power here. Divine intelligence is already resolving this perfectly. No appearance has reality or power apart from the belief I give it. This witnessing does not deny practical action. It changes the consciousness from which you act. The witnessing practice trains you to live from truth rather than appearances. At first, you will forget and fall back into reacting to conditions as if they are ultimate reality. This is normal. The key is catching yourself and returning to the witness perspective. What is the truth here? Not what appears, but what is true. God is the only presence, power, and reality. Everything else is temporary appearance. As you combine these practices, recognition, listening, taking no thought, and witnessing, you build a consciousness of truth that gradually becomes your natural way of being. This is not about perfecting a technique. It is about shifting your identity from human limited self to divine infinite self. This shift is what sets you free, exactly as Jesus promised. The truth of your divine consciousness, realized and lived, is your freedom. Now let me address the obstacles you will encounter on this path, because Joel Goldsmith was honest about the challenges. The first and most persistent obstacle is doubt. Even as you practice recognition and begin to understand the truth of your divine identity, a voice in your mind questions whether any of this is real. Is this just spiritual philosophy? Am I deceiving myself? How can I be divine consciousness when I still struggle with problems? This doubt is natural and actually indicates you are taking the practice seriously. If you felt no doubt, you probably have not grasped how radical this truth really is. The doubt comes from your conditioned human consciousness, which has spent years or decades identifying as a limited material being. That old identity does not surrender easily. It fights for its survival by generating doubt about the new awareness emerging. Joel taught that you do not overcome doubt by fighting it or trying to convince yourself through mental argument. You overcome doubt through experience. Each time you practice recognition and feel even a moment of peace that surpasses understanding, you are having direct experience of your divine consciousness. These moments accumulate. Gradually, your own experience becomes more convincing than your doubt. But you must be patient with yourself. Some days the truth feels clear and present. Other days the doubt seems to dominate. This fluctuation is part of the process of consciousness transformation. The key is not achieving a permanent high state, but consistently returning to the practice regardless of how you feel. Your faithfulness to the practice matters more than your emotional experience of any single session. The second major obstacle is what Joel called the desire for phenomena. People want dramatic spiritual experiences, miraculous healings, instant manifestations. They measure their spiritual progress by outer results rather than inner transformation. This desire for phenomena actually blocks the deeper work of consciousness change. Why? Because it keeps you focused on effects rather than cause, on circumstances rather than consciousness. Joel emphasized that spiritual realization is not about acquiring power to manipulate your world. It is about recognizing the truth of your being so completely that your world naturally reflects that truth. The focus must remain on consciousness, not conditions. When you practice recognition to get healing, supply, or harmony, you are still operating from the consciousness of lack trying to become abundance. This reinforces separation. The paradox is that the less you focus on changing circumstances and the more you focus on realizing your true identity, the more your circumstances naturally transform. But this requires genuine surrender of the desire to control outcomes. You must want truth more than you want results. You must care more about knowing your divine identity than about manifesting specific conditions. This is spiritual maturity. Many people abandon the practice when they do not see quick outer changes. Joel warned against this. The transformation happens at the consciousness level first. Sometimes it takes weeks or months of practice before you notice outer shifts. But every moment spent in recognition of truth is building a consciousness that will eventually express as transformed experience. Trust the process, even when you cannot see immediate results. The third obstacle Joel identified is what he called taking on the world's beliefs. Every day you are bombarded with messages that reinforce the consciousness of separation, limitation, and fear. News reports declare lack, disease, conflict, and danger. Conversations revolve around problems and complaints. Social conditioning teaches you to identify as vulnerable material beings, subject to random circumstances and external powers. If you are not vigilant, these world beliefs infiltrate your consciousness and undermine your recognition practice. You spend 30 minutes in the morning recognizing God as the only presence and power, then spend the rest of the day absorbing messages that contradict that truth. Your consciousness becomes divided, trying to hold spiritual truth while simultaneously accepting material appearances as ultimate reality. Joel taught that you must guard your consciousness. This does not mean isolating from the world or denying practical realities. It means consciously choosing what you accept into your consciousness. When you hear news of disaster, silently recognize, God is the only presence and power. When someone complains about limitation, silently know, divine abundance is the only reality. You are not denying their experience but refusing to accept their consciousness. This guarding of consciousness requires constant vigilance, especially in the early stages of practice. But as your consciousness of truth strengthens, you become less affected by world beliefs. You can live in the world, engage with it practically, but not be of it spiritually. Your consciousness remains anchored in truth regardless of appearances. This is living from the inside out, rather than outside in. The final obstacle Joel warned about is spiritual pride, the subtle belief that your realization makes you superior to others who have not yet awakened to these truths. This pride is particularly dangerous because it seems spiritual on the surface. You are not proud of material achievements but of spiritual understanding. Yet pride of any kind, material or spiritual, indicates you are still operating from the separated ego consciousness. True spiritual realization is humble because it recognizes that there is only one consciousness, one presence, one being expressing as all. If you are the presence of God individualized, so is everyone else. The person who seems spiritually asleep is still divine consciousness, simply not yet aware of their true identity. Your realization does not elevate you above them. It allows you to recognize their divinity even when they do not. Joel taught that genuine spiritual awareness expresses as compassion, not judgment. When you truly realize your divine identity, you naturally see that same divinity in all. You cannot look at another person with condescension because you recognize them as the same consciousness you are. The moment you feel spiritually superior, you have fallen back into ego consciousness pretending to be spiritual realization. True realization dissolves all sense of separation. If you recognize these obstacles in your own spiritual journey, like this video to support others facing the same challenges. Subscribe for more. Joel Goldsmith teachings on consciousness transformation, and comment. Which obstacle currently tests you most, and how are you working through it? Now let us explore how this truth consciousness operates in advanced practice, when you face situations that seem genuinely threatening or impossible to resolve. Joel Goldsmith shared a powerful example from his own life. During World War II, he received a letter from a young man drafted into military service. The man was terrified, certain he would be killed in combat, consumed by fear day and night. Joel did not respond with platitudes or false reassurance. He did not tell the young man to think positive thoughts or affirm his safety. Instead, he taught him this practice. Several times each day, stop whatever you are doing and recognize this truth. I am not in a body that can be harmed. I am divine consciousness, which cannot be destroyed, diminished, or threatened. My true identity is God expressing as my individual being. This is the truth of what I am. The young man practiced this faithfully throughout his deployment. Joel told him that the practice was not to create safety, but to realize the truth of his indestructible spiritual identity. Whether his body remained safe or not, his true being could never be touched by external circumstances. This recognition brought him profound peace even in the midst of combat situations. He lived, not because the practice protected his body, but because his consciousness shifted from fear to peace. This example reveals the advanced understanding of Joel's teaching. The goal is not manipulating circumstances to your preference. The goal is realizing your true identity so completely that even threatening circumstances cannot disturb your peace. You are free not when conditions are perfect, but when you know yourself as consciousness that transcends all conditions. This is the freedom Jesus promised. This is what truth delivers. Another advanced application Joel taught involves relationships. Most people experience relationships from the consciousness of need. You need love, approval, companionship, validation from others. This need consciousness creates dependent, conflicted relationships because you are constantly trying to get something from another person, and they are trying to get something from you. Both people are operating from lack consciousness, and lack attracts more lack. When you realize your true identity as divine consciousness, everything changes. You recognize that you are already complete, already whole, already filled with the infinite love that you are. You need nothing from anyone because you are the fullness of all. From this consciousness, relationships become about giving rather than getting, about recognizing divinity in the other rather than extracting something from them to fill your emptiness. Joel taught this practice for relationships. When you interact with anyone, spouse, child, friend, colleague, stranger, silently recognize, I am not looking at a limited human being. I am witnessing divine consciousness expressing as this individual. Their true identity is the same infinite presence that is my true identity. We are not two separate beings trying to get along. We are one consciousness appearing as apparent multiplicity. This recognition transforms relationships gradually. You stop being triggered by others' behaviors because you see beyond the behavior to the divine reality. You stop trying to change people because you recognize their perfection at the consciousness level. You stop feeling hurt or rejected because you know your completeness does not depend on anyone's opinion or treatment. This is relationship freedom, and it emerges naturally from consciousness of truth. Joel also applied this consciousness to work and career. Most people approach their work from consciousness of earning a living, competing for resources, protecting their position, or proving their worth. This consciousness creates stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction because it is rooted in the belief that your survival depends on your personal efforts and that resources are limited, requiring competition with others. Truth consciousness recognizes that infinite intelligence is expressing as your life work. You are not a limited person trying to succeed in a competitive world. You are divine consciousness individualized, and that consciousness naturally expresses as right activity, abundant supply, and perfect opportunity. Your work is not your source. God consciousness is your source, and your work is simply one avenue through which that infinite supply flows. Practice this in your work life. Before important meetings, challenging projects, or stressful situations, take a moment for recognition. Infinite intelligence is the only mind operating here. Divine love is the only presence in this interaction. God's perfect plan is already unfolding. I am not personally responsible for making something happen through my limited human ability. I am the avenue through which infinite wisdom expresses perfectly. This practice does not make you passive or lazy. Paradoxically, it often makes you more effective because you act from inspiration rather than desperation, from wisdom rather than fear, from confidence rather than anxiety. Your work becomes an expression of your divine consciousness rather than a struggle to survive. This shift in consciousness changes everything about how you experience your career and what you accomplish through it. Perhaps the most advanced application Joel taught involves what he called living the mystical life in the midst of the world. This means maintaining your consciousness of truth not just during meditation or spiritual practice, but continuously throughout your day as you engage with all the practical demands of human life. This is where spiritual realization becomes not a separate activity, but your way of being. The mystical life is not about withdrawing from the world to maintain your peace. It is about being so established in your true identity as divine consciousness that you can fully engage with the world without losing your center, without being pulled into the consciousness of separation, limitation, or fear. You live in the world, but from a different consciousness than the world operates from. Joel practiced this constantly. Even as he traveled, taught, counseled individuals, managed practical affairs, he maintained an inner awareness of God as the only presence and power. He taught that this continuous recognition becomes easier over time until it operates almost automatically, like breathing. You do not have to constantly think about recognizing truth. Your consciousness simply rests in truth naturally. This is the ultimate freedom. You are not dependent on circumstances being perfect to maintain your peace. You are not thrown off center by challenges or problems. You move through life from an inner stability that comes from knowing who you are at the deepest level. This is living from truth, and this is what sets you completely free, exactly as Jesus promised 2,000 years ago. Now I want to address something crucial that Joel Goldsmith insisted upon. This teaching is not about denying your humanity or pretending you have no challenges. You still have a human experience. You still face situations that require practical action, wisdom, and sometimes professional help. The difference is the consciousness from which you meet these situations. You meet them as divine consciousness expressing in human form, not as limited human struggling alone. Joel was clear that spiritual realization does not replace common sense, medical care when needed, or responsible human action. It transforms the consciousness from which you approach these things. You go to the doctor if appropriate, but you do not give the condition ultimate reality or power. You take practical action to resolve problems, but you do not believe the problem has power over your divine identity. You engage the human while knowing the spiritual. This balance is essential. Some people use spiritual teaching to avoid dealing with practical realities. They refuse medical help, ignore financial responsibilities, or neglect relationships, claiming they are living from higher consciousness. Joel called this spiritual bypassing, and it is not genuine realization. True consciousness of your divine identity makes you more responsible, more compassionate, and more engaged with life, not less. Other people get so caught up in handling the human details that they forget the spiritual foundation entirely. They live as if they are only material beings, subject to material laws, and they wonder why spiritual teaching seems irrelevant to their real life. The mystical life Joel taught integrates both. You are divine consciousness, and you have a human experience. You honor both without confusing them. As you deepen in this practice over months and years, Joel promised that certain markers indicate genuine transformation of consciousness. The first marker is increasing peace that is not dependent on circumstances. You notice that situations that once triggered anxiety now leave you calm. Problems that seemed overwhelming now feel manageable, not because the problems got smaller, but because your consciousness got larger, more spacious, more established in truth. The second marker is what Joel called the fruitage of the Spirit. Your life begins to demonstrate more harmony, supply, health, right relationships, and opportunities without you striving or manipulating. These appear naturally as your consciousness shifts. You are not making them happen. They are the natural expression of your realized consciousness. This fruitage is not the goal, but the evidence that consciousness has changed. The third marker is genuine love for all beings. Not forced niceness or spiritual politeness, but authentic recognition of divinity in everyone you encounter. You find yourself less judgmental, more compassionate, more patient with others' humanness because you see their divine reality beyond their temporary behavior. This love is not emotional sentimentality. It is consciousness recognizing itself in all forms. The fourth marker is what Joel called the listening consciousness becoming constant. You find yourself living in a state of inner listening, inner awareness, inner connection with the presence that you are. This is not something you have to create through effort. It becomes your natural state. You are established in your identity as divine consciousness, and that identity informs everything you think, say, and do. Joel Goldsmith spent his life proving that Jesus' promise is not religious theory but spiritual reality. The truth does set you free when you understand that truth is not doctrine but consciousness. The truth is the recognition of your identity as divine consciousness individualized. When you realize this truth deeply, not just mentally but as lived experience, you are freed from fear, lack, disease, conflict, and all the bondage that comes from believing you are separate from God. This freedom is available to you right now, not someday when you become more spiritual, not after years of study, not when you finally deserve it. Now. Because the truth of your divine identity is not something you achieve. It is something you recognize. It has always been true. You have always been the presence of God expressing as your individual being. You simply did not know it. The knowing is the freedom. Everything Joel taught comes down to this simple practice. Recognize the truth of your divine identity consistently until that recognition becomes your consciousness. Practice recognition in meditation. Practice it throughout your day. Practice it when facing challenges. Practice it in relationships and work. Practice taking no thought, witnessing from truth, and listening to the presence within. These practices build the consciousness that sets you free. The journey is not always easy. You will face doubt, obstacles, setbacks, and challenges. Your old consciousness will resist the new awareness. But if you persist with these practices, if you faithfully return to the recognition of truth regardless of appearances, your consciousness will transform. And as your consciousness transforms, your entire experience of life will reflect that transformation. This is the promise Jesus made, and this is the promise Joel Goldsmith proved true. So what happens when you truly understand what Jesus meant by the truth shall set you free? You stop being a victim of circumstances. You stop feeling powerless, anxious, and separate. You stop begging an external God to save you from your problems. You recognize that you are the presence of God individualized, and from that consciousness, you live in freedom regardless of conditions. This is the greatest discovery you can make in human life. Your transformation will not look like anyone else's. Your path will be unique because you are a unique expression of the one infinite consciousness. But the principles are universal. Recognition of your divine identity, practiced faithfully, transforms consciousness. Transformed consciousness naturally expresses as transformed experience. This is spiritual law, as reliable as any physical law, and available to anyone willing to practice. Joel Goldsmith gave the world this gift, the practical understanding of Jesus' mystical teaching. He proved through his own life and the lives of thousands he taught that consciousness transformation is not theoretical but achievable. The truth does set you free. Not belief in truth, not knowledge about truth, but realization of truth as your living consciousness. This realization is your birthright, your destiny, and your freedom. Begin today. Start the practice of recognition. God is the only presence where I am. God is the only power in my experience. God is the only reality of my being. Recognize this truth morning and evening. Practice taking no thought when anxiety arises. Witness from truth rather than reacting to appearances. Listen for the presence within. Do this faithfully and watch your life transform as your consciousness transforms. If your understanding of Jesus' promise has been transformed through these Joel Goldsmith teachings, like this video so others can discover this freedom, Subscribe for more consciousness-changing content, and comment, "I am divine consciousness," to declare your recognition of truth. Your transformation begins now.